In the quiet of the morning, before the first strike of battle, Miyamoto Musashi once said,
我ことにおいて答えをせず
he understood that mastery is not a moment, but a lifetime.
千日の経過を担当し万日の経過を連とする
To Musashi, the greatest battle was not against an enemy, but against oneself.
己に打ち勝つことは戦に勝つことよりも価値がある
In every action, he followed a simple truth.
生死を超越せよ
All right, so today we're going to be taking a deep dive into Miyamoto Musashi in the Book of Five Rings. You've given us quite a bit here to dig through excerpts from the book itself and historical background on Musashi. I mean, wow.
Yeah, it's a lot, but it's really fascinating stuff. At first you might not think a samurai writing back in 1643 would have much to say to us here in 2025, but Musashi's insights into strategy and self-mastery, well, they're surprisingly relevant.
Yeah, and that's what I'm excited to unpack with you. But before we get into all that, can you give us just a quick rundown on who exactly Miyamoto Musashi was for those who might not know?
Well, he was a legendary swordsman. First and foremost, he was undefeated in over 60 duels, but he was more than just a fighter.
Oh, okay, so he wasn't just some brute force warrior then.
Not at all. He was actually a skilled calligrapher, a painter, even a sculptor and a metal worker. I mean, talk about a true Renaissance man. And centuries before that term ever even existed.
Wow, so master of multiple disciplines, it sounds like it.
He really was. And, you also have to consider the historical context, too. He lived during the Kyoto Renaissance, which was a time of incredible artistic flourishing right after a whole century of civil war. So you can imagine the energy and ferment of that era.
Yeah, it wasn't just swords and battles. It was creativity, intellectual exploration. And Musashi was right there in the middle of it.
Exactly, and that leads us to his philosophy, which you can really see reflected throughout the Book of Five Rings. He placed a huge emphasis on the mind as the ultimate weapon.
I've always heard the phrase mind over matter, but I'm guessing Musashi took it to a whole new level.
Oh, he absolutely did. He truly believed that true victory came from cultivating inner strength, discipline, and a deep understanding of strategy.
And that's where the Book of Five Rings comes in, right? Can you tell us a little about the book itself? I know it's divided into these 5 chapters: Earth, Water, Fire, Wind, and Void.
Right, and each of those 5 elements, well, they represent different aspects of strategy and self-development. It's really fascinating how he uses these natural elements as metaphors for cultivating personal mastery.
So it's not just about like fighting techniques then?
Not at all. It's a guide to navigating life's challenges, basically, whether you're facing an actual opponent or just wrestling with a difficult decision.
Interesting. So how exactly do these elements translate into practical advice? Let's start with Earth. What's the connection there?
Well, Earth represents discipline, the bedrock of everything Musashi believed, that without discipline, all other skills and talents are meaningless.
That makes sense. You can have all the talent in the world, but without discipline, you'll never really reach your full potential.
Exactly. And this is something he really emphasized in his own swordsmanship, his 2 heavens, 1 style, fighting with 2 swords. Well, it's all rooted in rigorous discipline. No shortcuts to mastery, he would say.
It's interesting because we often think of discipline as being restrictive. But in Musashi's view, it's actually liberating, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's about freeing yourself from all those distractions and weaknesses so you can actually focus on what truly matters.
Okay, so that's Earth. What about Water then?
Water is all about adaptability, being like water, flowing around obstacles, adjusting to any situation.
So being flexible, going with the flow.
Well, it's more than just that. It's about actively adapting, changing your approach based on whatever the circumstances are.
I can definitely see how that would be super crucial in a sword fight. But how does that translate to, say, the modern workplace?
Well, imagine you're in like a really tense negotiation and things aren't going as planned. Do you just stick rigidly to your initial strategy, or do you adapt and find like a new angle, a new approach?
I guess you have to be able to read the room, understand the other person's perspective, and then adjust your strategy accordingly.
Exactly. It's like Musashi says, in strategy, it is important to see distant things as if they were close, and to take a distanced view of close things. You got to be able to shift your perspective to see things from different angles.
That's great advice for pretty much any situation, really. All right, so we've got discipline and adaptability. What about fire?
Fire represents decisive action, knowing when to strike, seizing that opportune moment.
So it's not about just being impulsive, right? It's about recognizing the right time to actually act.
Precisely, Musashi says, there is timing in everything. Timing and strategy cannot be mastered without a great deal of practice.
It seems like there's a bit of a theme here: discipline, practice, mastery. Those seem to be like the cornerstones of Musashi's whole philosophy.
You're absolutely right. It wasn't just about swordsmanship. It was about cultivating this whole mindset, a way of being in the world.
Okay, so we've got earth, water, fire. Now let's talk about wind. What's the significance of that element?
Wind is all about awareness, being attuned to your surroundings, to your opponent's movements, and to those subtle shifts in the environment.
So paying attention, being observant.
Well, it's more than that, too. It's about developing a keen sense of perception, a heightened awareness of everything that's happening all around you.
I can see how that would be vital in a sword fight, but how does that apply to our lives today? I mean, we're not exactly facing off against samurai warriors every day.
True, but we are constantly bombarded with information and distractions. Think about it: social media, the news cycle, all those emails and notifications. It's so easy to get swept up in all of that and lose sight of what's truly important.
So wind is about being able to cut through the noise then and focus on what matters most.
Exactly. It's about cultivating that mind of no mind that Musashi talks about, a state of calm awareness where you're not swayed by distractions or caught up in your own thoughts and emotions.
All right, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about this mind of no mind. It sounds like a bit of a paradox.
It is, it really is, and it's a concept that goes beyond just sword fighting. It's about achieving a state of mental clarity and focus where you can act decisively and intuitively without being hindered by fear or doubt.
That sounds incredibly powerful, but also incredibly difficult to achieve. How do you even begin to cultivate that kind of mental state?
Well, it's definitely a practice, not like a destination, and it probably looks different for everyone. But Musashi emphasizes the importance of discipline, of training the mind just as you would train the body.
So it's about cultivating mindfulness, being present in the moment, quieting those inner voices that are always trying to distract us.
Exactly. He also talks about polishing both wisdom and mind earnestly. It's about developing a deep understanding of yourself, your strengths and weaknesses, your tendencies and reactions.
Self-awareness seems to be like a key ingredient in this mind of no mind cocktail.
Absolutely. Musashi would probably just say, know thyself, understand your own patterns, your triggers, the things that cloud your judgment or make you react impulsively.
So the more you understand your own inner workings, the better you can control your reactions and make those clear strategic decisions.
Precisely, and this is where Musashi's way of walking alone comes into play again. It's about developing that inner strength and self-reliance so you're not swayed by external pressures or what other people think. You're grounded in your own center.
So you're talking about developing that inner compass that guides you, even when the world around you feels chaotic.
Exactly. And this connects to the void chapter of the Book of Five Rings. Musashi says, when you realize that there is nothing lacking within you, the whole world belongs to you.
Wow, that's powerful. It's like saying that true strength and freedom come from within, not from achievements or possessions.
And that's such a relevant message for the world we live in today. Don't you think we're constantly being bombarded with messages about what we should be, what we should have, how we should look? Musashi's mind of no mind is like an antidote to all that. It's about finding that inner stillness and clarity amidst all the chaos.
Okay, so we've covered earth, water, fire, and wind. Now we come to the final element, void. This seems like the most mysterious and challenging concept of them all. What exactly did Musashi mean by void?
Well, he described it as the culmination of all the other elements. It's the state of mastery, where you've gone beyond just technique and strategy, where action flows effortlessly from a place of deep understanding and intuition.
So it's about going beyond just the how-to and reaching a level of mastery where it all becomes intuitive.
Exactly. He says what is called the spirit of the void is where there is nothing. It is the essence of the warrior's mind.
I think I'm starting to get it. But it also feels like we've only just scratched the surface of this concept. It definitely seems like something that requires deep contemplation and practice.
You're absolutely right. It's not something you can grab just intellectually. It's something you cultivate through experience, through practice, through confronting your own limitations and pushing beyond them. It's a lifelong journey.
Well, I'm definitely feeling inspired to embark on that journey. But before we go too deep into the void, let's take a step back and look at some of the other gems of wisdom that Musashi offers in the Book of Five Rings. There are so many quotes and concepts that still seem incredibly relevant to our lives today, even though they were written centuries ago.
I completely agree. And I think one of the most powerful things about Musashi's work is that he doesn't shy away from those harsh realities of life. He acknowledges the struggles, the pain, the inevitable losses that we all face. But he also offers a path forward, a way to navigate those challenges with courage and grace.
Okay, I'm ready to hear more about that path. Let's explore some of those timeless lessons from the Book of Five Rings and see how we can actually apply them to our own lives, our own struggles, our own aspirations.
Sounds like a plan, and maybe we can even start to glimpse the void along the way. One of my favorite Musashi quotes is, "Do nothing which is of no use." You know? It's such a simple statement, but it really packs a punch.
Yeah, it's a great reminder to focus our energy on what really matters. I know I can definitely be guilty of wasting time on things that ultimately don't contribute to my goals or my well-being.
It's so easy to get caught up in the busyness of life, isn't it? Musashi would probably tell us to step back and examine our habits and routines. Ask ourselves, is this actually serving me? Is this moving me closer to my goals? Or is it just clutter and distraction?
Yeah, I think a lot of us could benefit from a little more Musashi-inspired minimalism in our lives.
Absolutely. And this ties back to his emphasis on discipline and the way of walking alone. It's about making those conscious choices, defining your own path, and not being swayed by the demands or expectations of others.
So taking ownership of your life, your time, your energy.
Exactly. And it's about being willing to let go of things that are no longer serving you, even if they're comfortable or familiar.
There's that theme of adaptability again. It seems like Musashi was really onto something with this idea of being fluid, responsive, and open to change.
He definitely was. And, this idea of doing nothing, which is of no use, it can also apply to our thoughts and emotions.
Okay, now I'm curious, how do we apply that principle to our inner world?
Well, think about those negative thoughts that just keep looping in our minds. Those anxieties and fears that hold us back. Are they really serving us in any way? Are they helping us to grow or move forward? Or are they just creating unnecessary suffering?
Wow, that's a powerful question. It's like Musashi is challenging us to be mindful not only of our actions, but also our thoughts and feelings.
Exactly. He would probably say, don't let your mind be a battleground. Choose thoughts that empower you, that support your goals, and that contribute to your well-being.
I love that. It's like taking those negative thoughts captive and choosing to focus on what's positive and constructive instead.
Right. And, this actually ties back to the mind of no mind. It's about cultivating this state of awareness where you can observe those thoughts and emotions without getting completely swept away by them.
So instead of being ruled by our thoughts and feelings, we become the observer, the one who chooses which thoughts to engage with and which to let go of.
Precisely. It's about taking back control of your mental landscape and creating a more peaceful and focused state of being.
This is all starting to sound a bit like meditation or mindfulness practice.
You're right. And while Musashi doesn't explicitly talk about meditation, his emphasis on cultivating mental clarity and focus, it really aligns perfectly with those practices.
I'm starting to see how all of these pieces fit together. The discipline, the adaptability, the awareness, the mind of no mind. They're all interconnected. They all seem to be pointing towards this idea of self-mastery.
Exactly. And it's not about achieving some perfect state of enlightenment or anything. It's a journey, a process of continuous learning and refinement.
Speaking of journeys, Musashi talks about this concept of ferrying across in the Book of Five Rings. Can you explain what he meant by that?
Sure. He uses the metaphor of crossing a sea to represent navigating life's challenges. It's about knowing when to be bold, to take a calculated risk, to set sail even when the weather looks a little uncertain.
So having the courage to step outside of your comfort zone then, to embrace the unknown.
Exactly. But he also emphasizes the importance of preparation, knowing the capacity of the ship and the weather patterns well, as he puts it.
So it's not just about being reckless, it's about assessing the risks, preparing as best you can, and then making a move when the time is right.
Precisely. And he even talks about the need to adapt along the way, to put in the oars when the wind changes.
Okay, so it's like setting a course, but also being willing to adjust your sails as needed.
Exactly. And this concept has so many applications in the modern world. Think about starting a business, for example. It's a huge leap of faith, of ferrying across into uncharted territory.
You need to have a vision, a plan, and the resources to weather those storms.
Right, but you also need to be adaptable, to be able to pivot when the market changes, or when unforeseen challenges arise.
So it's about having that entrepreneurial spirit, but also having the wisdom to know where to change course.
Precisely. And this concept applies to personal relationships as well. Sometimes you need to be willing to have that difficult conversation, to set a boundary, to take a leap of faith even when it feels a little risky.
So instead of just staying in a comfortable but unfulfilling relationship, you ferry across to a new shore, even if it means facing some rough waters along the way.
Exactly. And Musashi might even say that sometimes the most rewarding journeys involve a bit of risk and uncertainty.
It's in those moments of challenge that we truly discover our strength and resilience.
Absolutely. And, this whole concept of ferrying across, it ties back to another important Musashi principle, the idea of renewal.
Okay, tell me more about this idea of renewal. Does this mean hitting the refresh button on our lives?
In a way, yes, Musashi says, when you and your opponent are fighting and nothing is going right, nor is there progress, be of a mind to throw off your former intention and start entirely anew. Take on another rhythm and see your way to victory.
So recognizing when a strategy isn't working and being willing to change course.
Exactly. It's about having the flexibility to adapt, to let go of what's no longer serving you, and to embrace a new approach. And this is crucial not just in battle, but in all aspects of life.
I'm getting that stance, no stance vibe again. Adaptability really does seem to be a recurring theme in Musashi's philosophy.
It definitely is. And this renewal concept is particularly relevant in today's world where things are constantly changing and we need to be able to adapt to new challenges and opportunities.
Think about the job market, for example. The skills that were in high demand just a few years ago might be completely obsolete today.
You need to be willing to learn new things, to upgrade your skills, to reinvent yourself.
So it's like embracing lifelong learning, being a student of life, always open to new knowledge and experiences.
Exactly. And this applies to our relationships as well. We grow and evolve, and sometimes our relationships need to evolve too.
We may need to have some honest conversations, set new boundaries, or even let go of relationships that are no longer serving us.
Right. And Musashi might say that this process of renewal can be painful at times, but it's ultimately necessary for growth and transformation. He even compares it to piercing the bottom, meaning you have to go deep within yourself to confront your fears and your limiting beliefs.
Okay, that sounds intense. But I can see how facing those inner demons could lead to greater strength and clarity.
Exactly. And it's in those moments of facing our shadows that we often discover our greatest potential. Remember what Musashi said, from one thing, know 10,000 things.
Meaning by confronting one challenge, you can develop the skills and resilience to overcome countless others.
Precisely. And it's a message that's incredibly relevant in our world today where we face constant change and uncertainty. Musashi's teachings remind us that we have the power to adapt, to remove ourselves, and to emerge from challenges stronger and wiser than before.
It's like he's saying, hey, don't be afraid to shed your old skin, to embrace the unknown, and to trust in the process of transformation.
I love that interpretation. It really speaks to the heart of what Musashi is trying to convey in the Book of Five Rings. It's not just a guide to sword fighting, it's a guide to living a life of purpose, of mastery, of courage, even in the face of uncertainty and change.
You know, we've talked a lot about the philosophical and strategic aspects of Musashi's work, but there's also a very practical, tactical side to it, isn't there?
Absolutely. And while we may not be facing literal sword duels in our daily lives, there are still some valuable lessons we can take away from Musashi's tactical advice. For example, one of his key principles is stepping on the sword. He describes it as taking your action immediately upon your opponent's action.
So disrupting their rhythm and seizing the initiative, instead of waiting for your opponent to make a move, you anticipate their attack and counter it.
Precisely. And this applies to so many situations in the modern world. Think about a negotiation, for example. Instead of passively reacting to the other party's demands, you can anticipate their arguments, prepare your counterpoints, and take control of the conversation.
So it's about being proactive, about dictating the terms of engagement, rather than being on the defensive.
Exactly. And this can apply to creative endeavors as well. Instead of waiting for inspiration to strike you, step on the sword, by setting a schedule, showing up consistently, and taking action even when you don't feel like it.
So overcoming that resistance, that procrastination, and just getting to work, I think a lot of us could use a little stepping on the sword in our creative lives.
Absolutely. And this mentality can even apply to our own negative thoughts and self-sabotaging behaviors by recognizing those negative thought patterns and immediately countering them with positive affirmations or constructive actions.
It's about breaking the cycle of self-doubt and taking charge of our own mental landscape.
You got it. And this ties back to Musashi's emphasis on self-mastery and the mind of no mind. It's about recognizing those mental patterns and choosing to respond differently, to act from a place of clarity and purpose rather than fear or doubt.
This stepping on the sword concept is so much deeper than I initially realized. It's about taking control not just in external battles, but also in our own internal struggles.
And that's the brilliance of Musashi's work. It operates on multiple levels, offering insights that are both practical and profound. It challenges us to think differently, to act with intention, and to strive for mastery in all that we do.
Now, you mentioned earlier that Musashi wrote the Book of Five Rings while facing his own mortality. It must have been a profound experience for him to distill his life's wisdom into this guide for his students.
Absolutely. And I think it adds a certain weight, a certain urgency to his words, He wasn't just theorizing about strategy and self-mastery. He was living it, embodying it, even in the face of death.
That's such a powerful reminder that these principles aren't just abstract ideas. They're tools for navigating the real challenges of life. even the most difficult ones.
I think Musashi would agree with that. And, his own life story is a testament to his philosophy.
In what way?
Well, he faced numerous challenges, from duels to the loss of loved ones to illness, but he never gave up. He never lost sight of his principles.
He kept ferrying across, kept renewing himself, kept striving for mastery, even in the face of adversity.
Exactly. And that's a powerful message for all of us, isn't it? No matter what challenges we face, we have the capacity to overcome them, to grow from them, and to emerge stronger and wiser on the other side.
It's like Musashi is whispering to us from across the centuries, hey, don't give up, keep fighting, keep learning, keep evolving.
And, I think that's a message that will always resonate with people, no matter what era they live in.
Okay, before we wrap up our deep dive into Musashi's world, is there anything else you'd like to highlight? Any final nuggets of wisdom that you think are particularly relevant to our listeners today?
Well, there's so many to choose from, but I think one that stands out is his emphasis on knowing your tools. He says you should know the length of your own weapon. When you extend your arms, you must be able to wield the weapon freely.
That makes sense in a literal sword-fighting context, but how does that translate metaphorically to our lives?
It's about understanding your own strengths and weaknesses, your skills and talents, and using them effectively to achieve your goals. It's about being self-aware, knowing what you're good at and where you need to improve.
So it's like taking inventory of your personal toolkit and making sure you're using the right tools for the job.
Exactly. And it also means being willing to learn new skills, to expand your toolkit as needed.
Musashi would probably be a big advocate of lifelong learning and personal development.
I think he would. And this ties back to his emphasis on adaptability and renewal. The world is constantly changing, so we need to be willing to adapt, to learn, to evolve.
Otherwise, we risk becoming obsolete, like a samurai warrior clinging to outdated weapons and tactics.
That's a great analogy. And, there's another Musashi quote that comes to mind, and it's particularly relevant to this idea of knowing your tools, perceive that which cannot be seen.
Ooh, that sounds cryptic. What did he mean by that?
He was talking about the importance of intuition, of developing that inner sense that guides you beyond logic and reason. It's about seeing the bigger picture, sensing the subtle shifts in the environment, and trusting your gut instincts.
So developing that sixth sense, that inner wisdom that can guide us when we're facing uncertainty or making those tough decisions.
Exactly. And in today's world where we're bombarded with so much information and distractions, that ability to perceive that which cannot be seen, well, it's more important than ever.
It's like Musashi saying, hey, don't just rely on data and analysis. Tune in to your intuition, to your inner voice, to that deeper knowing that resides within you.
I love that. And this idea of intuition, it ties back to the mind of no mind. When you quiet all that mental chatter, you create space for that deeper wisdom to emerge.
Okay, so we've got know your tools and perceive that which cannot be seen. Are there any other Musashi gems you want to share before we move on?
Yeah, there's one more I was thinking about that seems super relevant to our, fast-paced, achievement-oriented culture today. Musashi says the primary thing when you take a sword in your hands is your intention to cut the enemy, whatever the means. Whenever you parry, hit, spring, strike, or touch the enemy's cutting sword, you must cut the enemy in the same movement. It is essential to attain this.
Okay, that sounds intense. He's talking about attacking and defending at the same time. But how does that even work outside of, sword fighting?
Well, it's not really about literally doing two things at once. It's about being totally present in every action, not just going through the motions, but like bringing real intention and focus to everything you do.
So even like mundane tasks, like answering emails or doing the dishes, you should approach them with this same level of intention.
It's not about turning everything into some kind of life or death struggle. It's more about cultivating that mindset of presence and purpose, bringing your full attention to whatever you're doing in that moment, even if it seems small or insignificant.
I like that. It's a good reminder. I know I'm so guilty of multitasking all the time, trying to do way too many things at once, and then ending up doing none of them well.
Musashi would probably say, focus on one thing at a time, do it with excellence, then move on to the next.
It's quality over quantity, being fully engaged in the moment rather than constantly thinking about the next thing on your to-do list.
Exactly. And, this idea of bringing intention to every action, it ties back to his emphasis on the mind of no mind. When you're not distracted by thoughts about the past or worrying about the future, well, you can really focus on the present moment and act with clarity and precision.
But quieting all that mental chatter and tapping into that flow state where action just becomes effortless and intuitive.
Yeah, I think Musashi would agree with that. And, he even applies this principle to facing death. He says, if you die, think only of dying, and if you survive, think only of living.
Wow, that's heavy. It's like he's saying just be totally present in each moment, whether it's your last or just another day in your life.
Exactly. It's about embracing life fully without fear or regret. And that's a really powerful message, I think.
Absolutely. It's a reminder to live intentionally, to make the most of each day, and to face whatever challenges come our way with courage and grace.
I think that's a great way to sum up Musashi's legacy. He was a warrior, a strategist, an artist, and a philosopher, and his wisdom continues to inspire us all these centuries later.
I feel like I've learned so much from this deep dive. I'm actually feeling inspired to go back and reread the Book of Five Rings with fresh eyes now.
I highly recommend it. And, I think the most important thing is to not just read Musashi's words, but to actually apply them to your own life.
To actually experiment with his principles, see how we can help you navigate challenges, make better decisions, and ultimately live a more fulfilling life.
Exactly. And that's what's so cool about these deep dives. It's not just about, acquiring knowledge. It's about taking that knowledge and putting it into action, transforming ourselves in the process.
Well said. I think Musashi would be proud of us for taking on this challenge, for ferrying across into his world and discovering the timeless wisdom that's found in the Book of Five Rings.
Yeah, I think so too. And who knows, maybe we even got a glimpse of the void along the way.
Perhaps, and on that note, dear listeners, we'll leave you with this final thought from Musashi. There is nothing outside of yourself that can ever enable you to get better, stronger, richer, quicker, or smarter. Everything is within, everything exists. Seek nothing outside of yourself.
Until it's time, keep diving deep. 2021.